Okay guys, welcome to lesson 1. Today we're going to have a look at two things. First thing we're going to start off with, we're going to look at Irregular Verbs, or another name for them might be Irregular Verbs. And then after that we're going to have a look at the Aimsir Chaite. In this video we're going to have a look at the Aimsir Chaite on Céad Réimniú. That might seem complicated, it's not at all, it just means one-syllable verbs. We're looking at the small one-syllable verbs, and in the second video for this lesson we're going to look at Untitled Chapter, the two-syllable verbs, okay? So everyone should have downloaded a set of notes like this, and we should be good to go. So if you go on to the second, third, fourth page there, what you will see is 1, 2, 3, 4. I put a list of all, I suppose, the most common verbs in Irish, and they're all regular verbs. And when I say regular verbs, bríomh or rialta, if you want to write this down somewhere on the page. Sorry, it's a terrible S. They follow the rules, okay? So, bríomh or rialta, they're the regular verbs. In Irish, most of our verbs are regular. In English, not the same. If you think of the verb to buy in English, past tense is bought. Very simple, right? It changes. In Irish, all verbs, bar 11, which you've probably seen half of them already from junior cert level anyway, are regular. So we have 11 irregular verbs. So here's a list. I think I put together about 70 odd verbs in the list. What are these useful for? Well, very often in an essay. When we're talking about leaving cert essays, paper 1, I say to a student, count how many verbs in your essay. They've got maybe 18 or 19 verbs over the course of 3 pages. When you put that into context, what's that? 3 by 6 per page, 18 verbs. It's not that impressive. Whereas I would aim for my students to have, or I'd hope they would have between like 30 and 40 different verbs in their essay. So don't get used to using V or cuig, or worse again, you start repeating the same verbs from the previous page. So we've got a huge list of verbs there, and that's to add to your vocabulary for paper 1. Okay? I've given you all the English beside them. And if you go all the way then to page 5, 6 and 7, these are study exercises. How do you learn your verbs? Well, very simply, for most of you, if you're not a fluent Irish speaker, like myself, you'll think in English, which is absolutely fine, that's absolutely normal. And what I'm going to try to do here is help you study the way you're going to work in an exam. And in an exam, when you're under pressure, when things maybe don't go as planned, you're going to revert back to English. Because why? That's what you naturally do. If something goes out of your head, if you forget something, or you're not going to go, oh, the verb to imagine is sowling. You're going to go, what's the bloody verb to imagine? And you're not going to remember it. So I put them back into English. I've given them in English and Irish in the first few pages for spelling purposes to make sure you can spell them properly. And then here, I put them into English. You have to start putting them back into Irish. And that's the way I would get yourself studying. After every essay, this is just a random one, it's a bríomh or cuisine, common verbs one. After you get an essay, my recommendation would be, you write, let's say if it's the life of a teenager, sailing Degora, and you've got 40 different verbs or 30 verbs in that essay, you write the infinitive in English of all the verbs, to wash, to do, to run, to whatever it is, and then you get working on putting them back into the infinitive in Irish. If you look at pages 1 to 7 there, you'll notice that I have those verbs in no tense, ceannaig, inish, éist. They're just giving orders. It's like the basic form of the verb. So what I'm going to do is, once you understand all these verbs, once you can put them into Irish for me, we're doing over the next 4 videos, we're doing 4 tenses. We're learning the rules of each tense, that we can put regular verbs into those tenses. So once you know the verbs, then you can talk in any tense that you want. Is that okay? So that's what we're looking at there. So that's just something for you guys to do at the start. There's not much teaching in that. That's just me giving you work, me sitting down, doing those verbs out for you. Where do those verbs come from? They're coming from the reading comprehensions over the last 10 years. They're coming from the clues tishkin. They're coming from essays, and they're also coming from the Shrap picture that I would have created as well. And that's where they have all come from. They're things that I've seen using the exam papers, things that I've thought of for essays, and things that I like to put in for the Shrap picture also, okay? So get working on them, get learning them. I've given you 3 study exercises there on pages 5, 6 and 7, and after that you should be making your own. For the likes of Gavin, Kulskar, you should have a page like this for every single poem that you do, with all the different verbs laid out that you think will be useful when answering that question, from English to Irish. And then if you want, the next stage of that could be that, let's say here, if it's just the past tense, it could be the present tense beside it as well, if you're discussing in the past tense or you're discussing in the present tense. But we'll work on that when we get to that. Is that alright? That's what we're looking at for common verbs. That's kind of the basics I would require for all students to be doing higher level from 5th year. I give that out to my students on the very first day of 5th year and I say, see how many of these you can get. They don't usually do too well. And then slowly but surely we work on it, we get a bit better, and then we build a huge range of vocabulary up. Great. Now we're comfy with that, we know what we do with that, you've made marks on that. Let's have a look at an Aimsir Chaite. Okay, Lana, give her a hooked, page 8. I'm going to make this as simple as I possibly can for you, because let's be honest, nobody likes grammar apart from me. But for you guys, I'm pretty sure you're not thrilled maybe to be sitting here doing grammar at whatever time of the day you are. But it's really, really important. If I said to you, imagine every sentence you have has a small mistake with your verb in it. Well, you're not going to get, higher than a H6 really, to be honest, are you? Because a verb, Irish is a verb-orientated language, which means a verb has to be at the start of pretty much every sentence. That's the ideal approach to language when we're talking about Irish. It's not always the case, but 90% of the time, and for Leaving Cert Standard, it is the best method to follow. So imagine you have a small little mistake or you're not really sure what you're doing. We've been off school for 6 months. So this is getting back to basics, back to the stuff we should have known coming into 5th year, coming into 6th year especially. So what I'm doing is, this is here to get you back on track, okay? So when Aimsir Chaite Lana go hook, I put the rules in here and I've colour coordinated them. And at the end, in the last piece, the last set of notes I give you, I'll put in a paragraph, let's say, of a Leaving Cert essay that I would have done, and I'll show you how I would study them at the start of 5th or 6th year. Very quickly then, by Christmas time, I would hope that maybe you don't have to do this anymore, but for some people it will help. If you're a visual learner and you like to see things rather than just hear, the colour coordination of your notes is really, really important. So in the essays, anytime I have a verb in the past tense, I'll highlight it in yellow. Present tense, whatever colour I put in the present tense for the next video. Is that okay? So we keep the same colours for every tense. On Cade Raimnu in green there means we're dealing with 1-syllable verbs, if you want to write that for me somewhere. 1-syllable verbs. Brihra ein shula, 1-syllable verbs. Brihra ein shula is 1 syllable. Doesn't really matter what language you're doing this in once you get the rules. Alright? A little tip here, if you want to write a study tip on the right hand side. Always think of an easy example. So sometimes students get bogged down in long verbs, short verbs, they don't recognise the verb, and always have a basic example in your head. And we're going to I put basic examples in with the bold highlighting there in them and the writings in white. So then if you're ever unsure, you go back to your basic example and follow the same rules. In the Aimsir Chaite, what do we do with the Aimsir Chaite? In the Aimsir Chaite, we change the start of the verb depending on the first letter of the verb. That's wordy, let's say that again. We change something at the start of the verb, we add something in usually, depending on the first letter of the verb. So we're dealing with consonant, we're dealing with guti, we're dealing with F, and we're dealing with S, okay? So as you can see there, I've got consonant, vowels, F, negatives, questions, have a look there, okay? So when we're dealing with a consonant, what are we looking at? We're looking at, let's say, cur, and we're looking at glon. Let's assume it's may for both. It doesn't matter what the word is. Once it starts on a consonant and you want to put it in the past tense, you have to put a shevu in here. So cur, chur. Glon, chlon. Make sense? Maybe you have nicer handwriting than mine, but you can't judge me on that. My grammar's pretty good there. Cur may, glon may. Anytime you want to put something in the past tense and it starts on a consonant in Irish, you put in a H. What's that? When I see that H as a fluent speaker, when I see that H there, that is like in English when you say, every day I walk, but yesterday I walked. It's like me hearing an ED at the end. Is that okay? That's what it's like for me. I know straight away what tense you're looking to talk in. Alright? Second one, when we're dealing with vowels. When we've got owl, for example. Alright? Everyone knows this. When you want to put something that starts on a vowel in the past tense, you add in a D apostrophe. Like that. Dole. 2. Just like that. Okay? So if it starts on a vowel, you put in a D apostrophe before it. Next one is we're dealing with is an F. Put in 2 here. Fog agus fon. Fon to wait or to stay, fog to leave. And with this, with the F, just in the past tense and in the conditional tense, what happens? F gets special treatment. So let's just focus on the past tense here. F gets special treatment in the past tense. It takes both rules. So it takes a D apostrophe, it takes an FH-AN. D apostrophe, FH alpha, the G, S-I-A-D. Like that. Okay? So when we're dealing with an F and you want to put it in the past tense, you put a D and you put a H in. With me on that? It should be simple enough. Next one that I didn't put in there, or should have put in, was an S. What happens when you're dealing with an S? I'm going to put up two verbs now. Walk and sweep. Put them in the past tense. I walked, I swept. So that was the question. Does S take a H? And everyone says yes and no, and I have no audience around me now, or classroom, or class, or students, or words, Shane, so I couldn't ask. But look, one takes a H and one doesn't. And here's the rule for S, if you want to write this in. S does take a H, it does take a shevu. A shevu is what we're putting in here, in there, and a shevu is always the second letter in the verb. S takes a H unless C, F, M, P, T. If C, F, M, P, T is the second letter after S, there is no shevu. If C, F, M, P, T is the second letter after an S, well then we cannot put a shevu in, it must stay the same. Is that okay? Quick rule of thumb there for you. Then we're looking at when we're using which. So straight away I've used may, to, I don't have she or she yet, shiv and she, I probably should have used she and she up there. But you'll notice I've no endings to put in here. There's only two places in the Aimsir Chaite in the past tense that we put in endings. Only two people require endings. The one for we, which we can say as shin or which. And the rehearser. Rehearser, the ser of reher, BH if it goes the other way around. What's that? We, when we're saying shin or mid, you might see that in my notes when we're doing an exercise in a minute, or the rehearser. That's the only place in the past tense we are required to put endings in. What's an ending? It's literally when you're adding something onto the end of the verb as well as at the start of the verb. You still change the start of the verb for this one, but you must add something into the end. So we've got two endings in Irish. We've got for one syllable in the past tense. Let me take that off the board. We've got AMAR and EAMAR, okay? And what I need you to do here is, and this is really, really important because it happens in every tense in the Irish language. One of these endings is considered Latin, and it's this one, broad. And one of these is considered quail. It's ironic that the one that's quail, slender, is usually longer than the one that's considered broad, Latin, okay? So the one that's broad is usually shorter. But anyway, that doesn't really matter for now. We need to figure out if a verb is Latin or quail. And how do we do that? Well, if we go to our gutty, the vowels. A, O, U. They're the vowels in Irish that we consider to be Latin. How do I get students to remember them? Think of them as bellies. They've all got bellies. They're eating too much. Oh, I better not name a fast food chain here just in case I get in trouble. But they're eating too much fast food in general, alright? So they've all got kind of rounded bellies. They're Latin. Like myself, maybe. I and E, quail, slender, the skinny ones, okay? And what you do here is to check out if a verb is broad or slender, quail or Latin. All you have to do, now, I'll take these off, is check what the last vowel in the verb is. The last vowel in the verb. So for cur, this was I, wasn't it? So that means it will be quail. It's a slender verb. For glon, it's an A, so it was Latin. Ol, it's an O, so it's Latin. When you see me underline like that, 3 little lines underneath, that's what I'm doing to highlight what the last vowel in the verb is, and it'll tell me if it's quail or lahan. The last vowel here, A, so it's a lahan. Same here, fog, so it's a lahan verb. That doesn't make a huge difference when you're talking about shiv and sheed because there's no endings. When you're talking about to or may, it doesn't really matter because there's no endings in place. But it does when we're using we. So let's have an example here of we. We're going to do cur, mwij. We're going to do fogmwid. And we're going to do omwid. So your train of thought should be 1, put it into the past tense. 2, who's talking. It's mwid for all of them. So now we need an ending. Alright? So the first thing we do is put this in the past tense. C-H-U-I-R. Cur mwij. The last vowel in the verb. Mwij is not a verb in case that confuses you. That's just a person who's talking. We. I means it's quail. So the ending is E-A-M-A-R. Churmer. And here's a tip to check if you're right all the time. You might hear someone say quail to quail, lahan to lahan. The last vowel in the verb should always be from the same family. So this is one family, this is 2. Should be from the same family as the first vowel in the ending. So this ends on an I, that's quail. The new ending starts on an E, that's quail. That means they match. Alright? Fogamwid, dogmer. Good. And dogmer. Make sense? For a question, we use air plus a shavu when we're asking a question in Irish. It's air plus a shavu, where possible. And then for a negative, we use near plus a shavu. Okay? And that's written there as well for you. Near plus a shavu. However, if we've got a verb that had a D apostrophe before it, we must lose that. So let's put this into a question here. In Irish, to answer someone correctly, we don't say yes or no. People do it, but it's incorrect. So to actually answer someone, if I said, did you drink? You'd say yes is, I drank. So let's use the verb to return, because we've used drank already. Fill, to return. So if I ask a question in red, I'm going to answer it. Did you return? Let's say er il tu nye. Did you return? Maybe after lunch in school, or you went in the Mitch. Er il tu. I returned. Dil me. That's the positive statement. And I did not return. Near ilme, I did not return. What do you notice after the question on the negative? I kept my H, which is great, but I lose the D apostrophe there. See here? Here? There's no D apostrophe because it cannot be kept after a question or a negative. And the final one is the ser briher. Briher ser. What happens with the briher ser? The briher ser in Irish, in the past tense, has 2 endings. It's got ADH or EADH. This is for 1-syllable verbs. And as you can see in my examples there, look at the start. It's the only one, I'll put a star beside this, it's the only verb in Irish in the past tense we don't change the start. And look at that. What is the briher ser? Look at my yellow box there. When someone has done something, but we are not sure who did the action. Give you an example. Look at, there's a window over there. Brishuk on inyo shinanye. That window was broken yesterday. I don't know who did it. I've just arrived in this morning. Matter of fact is the window's broken. It's been done. Okay? Rihuk. Somebody ran, like Rihuk, I can't think of an example of Rihuk, it's a bad one to use. Can I think of another one apart from Brishuk? I can use Rinuk, the screwed the helm bleachati. The exams were done last year, for example. I don't know every student who done the exams, but I know they were done because the stats say 60,000 people got predictive grades or calculated grades, whatever it was. Is that okay? That's what we're doing there. And remember, at the start of the Brí Séir, like I've given you on your two examples, you don't put in a shevu or d apostrophes at the start. Alright? On the next page, I've given you a basic example of every single thing that I've just spoke about. So if you're ever unsure, just learn the basic example. The ones I'd be looking at there is look at the last three especially. The first one you probably go with. Near cur, air cur, and then currach. Okay? Near hun, air hun, dunach. Near on, air on, fanach. And then near ol, air ol, olach. Okay? Make sense? I want you guys to have a go at page 10 and 11. You're going to do those examples for me now. And then we're going to finish up after that. And in the second video, I'm going to look at the two-syllable verbs. Does that make sense? So I want you to try these examples. I'm going to prep my board, put up the answers up here as you're doing them. And then you can check yours against mine. Again, they're all one syllables in this example. These examples, there will be mixed in a bit, but they're all one syllables for now. "17 examples, but the first one's done." You're looking at the first letter every time here, and you're looking at the person who did it. So again, you can pause this video if you want, because I'm going to start sticking up the answers, and then you can unpause me when you're ready to correct your own. Okay, there's our answers. The one I want to point out to you here is this one. Ri, number 3. I told you we always put a shevu onto all consonants, and I left this out on purpose. I wanted to see did anyone think it looked a bit strange with a H. And if you put a H in, it was incorrect. And that's no problem. Because making mistakes with your grammar at home isn't bad, because you're learning from your mistakes. Making them in exams, that's when it gets a little bit trickier. The letters L, N, and R. Think of a girl called Eleanor, who's a rebel without a cause. She doesn't follow the rules. She does whatever the hell she wants. And even though 1, 2, 3 are consonants, they don't take a shevu. Eleanor will never take a shevu in the Irish language. The letters L, N, and R will never take a shevu, and they will never take an uru in the Irish language. Okay? So keep that in the back of your head. So ri is just ri. So what happens if you see it written like that? Well, you have to read the rest of the sentence to see what context it is in. Is that okay? If it's in order or if it's in the past tense. If it's in the present, future, conditional, it will have endings thrown in. But for this one, it didn't. There's your answers all the way down. I didn't put in the name of people when it's in the colony just to save time. But you notice that unless it's a mer, I always put the person in. Bull Tomas it was here. Glon Mammy, I think, or Glon Daddy it was. Cur Daddy it was there. I just didn't put the names in. But when you're writing them out, apart from which, every other one you need to write she, and after it. Because they're all written the same, I need to know what person you're talking about. Is that alright? And again, when you're doing this grammar for me, that's all you have to do. Just write them out like that. Don't rewrite the whole sentence. I'm not looking for you to waste time. Alright? That's the 1-syllable verbs. We're going to have a look at the 2-syllable now in a second. Okay, see you in the second video. Okay, guys, welcome to part 2 of our Aimsir Chaite video. So, by now we've done all the 1-syllable verbs. This video we're going to focus on the 2-syllable verbs. And there's two things we have to remember here. We have two-syllable verbs in the past tense that don't need any endings, and then we have two-syllable verbs in the past tense that will have to take endings. Okay? So with every two-syllable verb, there's going to be a part like may, if you look up here, may, to, she, or she, shiv, she'd. These are the parts, or these are the people that we don't need to put in any endings for in the two-syllable verbs. So what do I mean by that? So let's say if I want to say Canagino was to buy, a nice simple example just to show you first time. To put that in the past tense, we do exactly what we did with the one-syllable verbs. Exactly the same thing. So we look at the first letter. And there's no endings for these at all. So Canag, just Canag may. CH. Bolig starts on a B, that's a consonant. So Volig, B-H-A-I-L-I-G-H. Uscal starts on a vowel, Duscal. Oh, put the wrong person in there. Same thing though. Duscal, she. Fragger to answer. Dragger, she answered. Inish starts in a vowel, Ahan starts in a vowel. Same thing as Uscal, Dinish. So what you see there, when I'm dealing with the person that's may, to, she, shiv or she'd, when I'm dealing with those people with two-syllable verbs in the past tense, all I have to do is change the start of the verb and put in the appropriate person. There's no endings to add in. Like that, okay? See what I did there? All I did was change the start of the verb, exactly like the one-syllable verbs. However, when we get to we, us, muid or shin, it's a little bit different. And I have an example given to you there. Look at page 12. You see the way I've got the endings put in there. And again, I've highlighted everything to show you the changes that I've done for the two-syllable verbs. So you're looking at the fifth one down. Dimriamer, Janiamer, Difriamer, Duskliamer. And then we're also looking at the very last one as well for the Brihar Ser. But we're going to focus in on we or us at the minute, the fifth one down. And if you go to page 13, there's three types of two-syllable verbs. There are ones that finish on A-I-G-H and I-G-H, like these. And if you want to put coming out of that, that's 90% of the verbs we're going to be dealing with that are two syllables. Fisrig, Ahrig, Dushig, Deshig, Bolig, Canig, Ulvig, most of them. So about 90% are going to be A-I-G-H, I-G-H verbs. Then we've got verbs that finish in A-I-L and A-I-R. It's about probably 8% of the rest of them. Uscal, Fragger, Cuddle, Frastal. And then we've got the last ones, the last type that usually finish in I-N, I-S, I-R. Usually they have an I as the second last letter and they're small enough verbs. So you would be fooled by looking at Inish and assuming that it's a one syllable, but because there's an I just before the end each time, like Immer as well, for example, it's a two-syllable verb. And you see where it says study tip in the little box there on your notes. I want you to write this in where your study tip is. In English. To deal with two-syllable verbs, we must take something out before we add in an ending. So when dealing with two-syllable verbs, we must take something out before we add in an ending. We must take something away from the verb and add in an ending. So that's what we're going to do here. You still have to change the start to put it in the past tense, but to get the appropriate ending, we have to take something away at the end. So let's have a look here. Canig. To put Canig in the past tense, it's CH, so we'll do that. So now it's going to be in the past tense. What do I take off for the AIGH and the IGH verbs? That's exactly. You take off everything from AIGH to the end or IGH to the end. It doesn't matter if it's AIGH or IGH, you just take it all off. And then you're left with this. And that's frave, the root. That's the root of your new verb. Now, we have two endings for when it's Latin and quail. So now what do? Let's look. We've got a situation here where the last vowel in Ceannaigh is an I, but now all of a sudden the last vowel in the new verb that we're creating is an A. So there's a difference. So this is really important because this happens at every single tense when we're conjugating verbs. When we're changing verbs and putting endings on two-syllable verbs. We've got to take something away. And what you need to remember is, and make note of this somewhere, that you decide if the verb is quail or lahan from the new verb you're creating. You go from the stem, from the phrase, from the root, the new root of the verb or the new stem of the verb. That's where you decide if it's quail or lahan. So now we forget that. This is what we're dealing with. It's an A, so it's going to be lahan. We bought Ceannaigh. You guys try bollig there. Now in your exams, don't use two colour pens, but I'm just showing you where I'm getting my endings from. Is that alright? Some people say, oh, why did you keep the I? I didn't keep the I. That's an I. This is an I fada, and the reason there's an I fada is there because it's the first letter in my ending. I didn't keep the I, so just be wary of that. I'm not keeping anything from IGH, I'm just putting in the ending. So with the AIGH verbs, you take off the AIGH, take off the IGH, put it in the past tense with a shevu or a D apostrophe or a D apostrophe FH, and stick in the ending. This is all for we, from which. For the AI, L and the AIR verbs, this is where people make a mistake, because what did we do here? We took away everything. With the second type of verbs, we don't take away everything. We take away just the two vowels at the end, the A and the I. We just take away the A and the I. So we put it in the past tense still. How do we put it in the past tense? For Uskal, it's D apostrophe O. For Fragger, D apostrophe FH. So that's the start of putting it in the past tense. What do I have left here? I have O, S, C, L, and here I have E, A, G, R. So I've just taken out the AI. But I keep the L and I keep the OR. Just be wary of that. Now, what's my last vowel in the new thing I'm creating? They're both lahan. 99% of the time when it finishes in AIL or AIR, it's going to be lahan anyway. The rule of thumb. Duskleamer, Dragreamer. Duskleamer and Dragreamer. Okay? And finally, the last type we have is Inish and Ahan. And with these ones, you just take out the last vowel. It's always going to be an I, so take out the last I. Let's put it into the past tense. So again, that's just a verb, but I took out the last I. And you add in an ending. It's the same endings again for we. They're both I. Markers. I is the last vowel in both. So therefore it's quail, because these are quail, I and E. This one is Latin. A-O-U. Like that. And you stick in the right ending. Like that. Is that okay? That's how you conjugate a two-syllable verb. When you're putting in an ending. When you're not putting in an ending over here, when it's just may, to, she, you just change the start as normal and you stick in the person. Over this side, when you're dealing with we, you do that. And the only difference with the Brihar Ser is there's a different ending. Okay, so let's look at the two-syllable ending from the Brihar Ser. Brihar Ser, the free verb. Ceannaigh, the Heidi Galernier. Let's say we own a shop. All the clothes were bought yesterday. I physically don't know who bought every item of clothing, but I know as the shopkeeper, I have no clothes left in my shop. So Ceannaigh, all the clothes were bought yesterday, for example. And when we're dealing with the Brihar Ser, all we do is the exact same thing, except we take off any change at the start. So if I wanted to write Ceannaigh in the Brihar Ser, if I write Ceannaigh in the Brihar Ser past tense, it is C-E-A-N-N-A-I for the O-D-H. Bollig, B-A-I-L, Boliak, like that. These are all the Brihar Ser ones. Just to show you one example. Uskal, O-S-C-L, Uskliak. Here. Like that. Okay? The whole way down. Same thing. I just don't change the start. And I put in the new ending. Brihar Ser example here for these as well. In Shia. That's how you do the Brihar Ser. Same idea, you get the stem of the verb, you put in the Brihar Ser endings, the ones in blue, but you don't change anything at the start. That's how we work two-syllable verbs. Okay? And on the next page, we've got examples there on page 14. I've got 13 of them. I think I have. I do indeed. I want you to do the 13 examples there as quick as you possibly can. While you're doing that, I'm going to set up my board. I'm going to get the answers. And then we're going to talk about what you're going to do to make sure this all sticks and we understand it. The most common mistake I see just after we've done this is they anytime they see a two-syllable verb, they put the ending for we in. You don't have to do that if it's may, to, she or she, shiv or she. So just don't fall into that trap if possible. Again, I'm going to start putting the answers up. You guys work at your own pace. I'm a big believer in doing things slowly and properly rather than fast and incorrect. If you do this really quickly and get 3 of them wrong, it's no good. If you do them a little bit slower and get them all right, it's a hell of a lot better. Okay? Deshik. It's a better mark. Marker's wasting on me. There's our answers for 1 to 13 there. No need to rush. You can pause the video at any stage you want. Correct them, make sure they're correct. Is that okay? On the next page, what I'm going to do is I've done a revision exercise for you. And I've mixed up the 1 and 2 syllable verbs. Cade Raimnu is Dara Raimnu. Anything in blue is on Dara Raimnu. Anything in green is on Cade Raimnu. Okay? The only time that's important in the past tense for is when we're dealing with the endings from which. It's am-aor and eam-aor for 1 syllable, and it's ai-fada o-m-aor and i-fada o-m-aor for 2 syllable endings with we. Okay? And you will have to use both of them. I've made sure both of them are in your examples. Is that okay? So what you do is you put the English in, like I've done the first one, Ulvig to prepare, Dulvig me, I prepared. On the next page after that, you've got all the answers there because you can do them in your own time. And finally, I put in all the Aimsir Chaite, Brihar, Navriata. Go to 17. You're not going to do the revision exercise just now. You'll do that. You can correct it in your own time. The Brihar and Navriata on page 17. I put them all in yellow because yellow is the colour we're going to use for the past tense here. You've got 11 irregular verbs in Irish. They're the same 11 verbs. I only have 10 fingers and thumbs. That's why I'm holding up like this. But You get the idea. So they're the same 11 irregular verbs in every tense in Irish. There's not more than 11, there's just these 11. And the way I'm going to ask you to learn them is aber, be, feck, fi, den, te, clush, tar, it, tor, agus, bear. And you may have learned them in different order, and that's fine, there's no right or wrong order. However, if you look at the way I'm asking you to learn them, aber, be, feck, fi, den, te, look at those, learn them in that order, and I'll tell you why. If you go to 17, they are the most volatile verbs in the past tense in Irish. They're the trickiest to use, and they change most dramatically. If you look at them here, if you're not familiar with some of them, aber, dúirt, be, vi, feck, cunnig, fi, for, they change dramatically. And more importantly, I told you at the start of all this Aimsir Chaite stuff that we only use near and air for a negative and for a question in the Aimsir Chaite. We only use near for a negative statement, and we only use air for a question in the past tense. However, look at your first six, your 6 deadly sins. They all use ni and they all use on. So that's what makes it easy for you to remember. If you're looking at an irregular verb and you go, oh wait, I know the ending for that, or I know, is it air, is it on when I'm dealing with on rav or air rev? Oh yeah, it's one of the first 6. It's aber, be, feck, fi, den, te. So it breaks this rule. They're the only 6 in the Irish language that use ni and that use on. Your study tip for them is figure out the ones you're going to use most in your essays and in your poetry. Like to see, you're going to use a lot in poetry. To do in poetry, you're going to use a lot. To go, not going to go in poetry, but you're going to use that in paper one of your essay. Clush, to hear, when you're hearing maybe we're talking about in Tarakir, the poem, you're going to hear some of the things that the poet puts in, then some of the noises, I should say, the fumina. So have a look at the ones you think are most useful. Aimsir Chaite, jarfuck means a positive statement, something that I did, I saw, I was. Negative, I was not, I did not hear. And a question is how you ask a question there, obviously. And again, the first 6 are the most volatile. So your study tip is figure out the ones you're using most and focus in on getting them learned. First 6 usually is the ones you use most, to be honest. And on the next page, I've got the verbs put in for you. You need to put the English in, the positive and the negative. Don't worry too much about the question format. You're very rarely going to use the question format. That's more for your Irish oral, that when you hear the question, you know, oh, it's on vodka, cunnig. Okay? That's the type of stuff there. That's the type of stuff we're doing. Or let's say if we go back again, look at the previous page for me. If I'm asking you in the oral, on vortu, did you get something when you were on holidays? It's for or ní vor. You're able to answer it. In Irish, we don't say yes. Sha is incorrect to answer questions. When you ask, like, did you drink? I drank, or I did not drink. Okay? That's what we're looking at there. So work on those irregular verbs. Again, a little tip sometimes I say to students is photocopy that page a couple of times before you do it, so you don't have to make your study notes again and again. Photocopy the page. Have a couple of copies of it. Actually, you don't even need to, because you can download these notes for free. So print a second copy off. If this was, helpful and it was good, print the notes again and do it back to front to back again without any help, and you have all the answers that are there because you've got them from me on the board for the first 2 examples, and for the last one there, you've got the answers in the booklet itself. Is that okay? So I hope that was helpful. That was an Aimsir Chaite, back to basics, the first one. The next tense I'm going to look at is an Aimsir Láithreach. Same again, 1 syllable and then 2 syllables. See you for the next video.